So yeah, St John's at Oxford is actually very wealthy as well. So there's a whole thing about you can go from Oxford to Cambridge without leaving St John's land. Um, and there's a couple of other colleges that are very famously wealthy, and yeah, as Rohan said, they pass on their money in different ways that he's kind of outlined. Some of it is academic related, like you'll get research funding and things like that more easily and in greater quantities, although that tends to be more postgrad. And some of it really is, when there's balls at the end of term, the college will put in 50 or 100 grand or something like that on top of the money raised by tickets. So it's a nice thing to have, but it's not going to make or break your university experience either. And once you leave, no one's ever going to be like, oh, your degree was from that college, and that doesn't happen.
No. Exactly. Okay. Moving on to food and drink. So this is a close subject, close to my heart, because I went to Gonville and Keys, which was renowned for having terrible food, and I think it has improved over the years. And I had been warned, and I said, well, how bad could it be? And in fairness, it wasn't. It was okay, but when I compared it to some other colleges, it was quite a bit below standard. Food and drink is not just the quality, but it's also the pricing. So simple things like pint of beer, but just a pint of anything, can be quite different at different colleges. Was that your experience as well, Harry?
Yeah, pretty much.
We've in our ultimate Oxbridge College guide, we've actually got the price of a pint at every single Oxbridge College, which I always think makes for a fascinating read and analysis. But in terms of dining, they can be very different, not just in terms of the food served, but the setting and the traditions followed. So some of the more traditional colleges, like the one I went to, they would have formal hall 6 nights a week. You'd have to wear gowns, it'd be candlelight dinner, fully silver service. Other colleges, it's very much a canteen or buffet style instead. So canon is often very, very different depending on where you go.
Yeah, and I think that's something to think about as well. Do you enjoy the idea of wearing a white bow tie and a gown 6 nights a week for dinner? I mean, for some people, that's like an amazing experience. For other people, it's their idea of hell. So, and you don't have to have dinner in college either. You can go out and, make your own dinner and whatever. So, there's other options as well. But
yeah, exactly. And, some colleges encourage it. So my college is very aggressive towards trying to create that community by getting more people to attend hall. So they actually removed all of our hobs. So we were essentially left with a George Foreman and a kettle. It was about the extent of what we could cook. Whereas other colleges are a lot more liberal and just say, wherever you want to eat, you can eat. So again, it depends on your preferences, and you can get a feel of all of this by going to the open days. Cool. And the final thing is the subjects and teaching. Well, as Harry's already alluded to, not every college will offer every single subject. So some colleges just don't have the facilities to do this. The quality of teaching is done at a university level. So all your lectures, what else? Practicals, and if you have any large dissection rooms, if you're a medic, for instance, all of those take place at a university level, and they'll purposefully mix you with other colleges. Whereas the supervisions or tutorials, those take place within your college, and the quality of those can be quite variable. So some colleges you'll get taught by world-leading experts. Others you may end up with a professor who's actually too busy to teach and therefore outsources their teaching to their grad student, for instance. There is a huge spectrum of quality. Regardless, it's still a lot better than having no supervision tutorials. They're still very, very valuable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing is that even a senior grad student is so far out of your level academically that even though their professor is even more out of their level, to you, I'm not sure it makes that much difference. And being a world expert on something doesn't actually mean that you're necessarily a good tutorial holder or teacher. There's people who are just a grad student who might actually do far better tutorials than the world expert on molecular biology or whatever.
Sorry, there is nothing for me to resume.
Sorry, that was my Alexa.
Alexa disagrees sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just you want to be starstruck. So at my college, some of the physicists in the earlier days were taught and had supervisions with Stephen Hawking, which is, it sounds great and it sounds quite fun, but his ability to create like long sentences was very slow, for instance. So it was a real experience. But they probably didn't. An undergraduate probably doesn't need Stephen Hawking teaching them. They probably can suffice with someone a few pegs down and still be easily stretched, right? Okay, fine. So we move on to, is there a strategy? So how did you pick your college when you were applying?
Well, so for me, it was actually relatively easy because at the time, there was only, I think, 5 colleges doing archaeology and anthropology. So archaeology and anthropology, Arch and Anth, as it's called, is a relatively small subject. There's only 20 places each year, and those are not split one place in 20 colleges. They're split 4 places in 5 colleges, roughly. Some of them were 5, some of them were 3, 2, whatever, but that was roughly. So one of them was St Hilda's, which is an all-female college, which, as you might have guessed, I wasn't eligible for. Then one of them, someone from my school, was applying to that college for archaeology and anthropology, so that one was out as well. And so that left 3, Magdalen, St Hugh's and Keble. Magdalen, famously hard to get into, so I dropped that one. And yeah, there we go. Applied to Keble and ended up with St Hugh's. So that's my story.
Right. Actually, that's a very common story. Whereas we'll talk a little bit about this, but I think it's almost 40% of students who apply to the college they want to go to Oxford and end up at another one. Is actually a very common thing. So here we are.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, sorry, one thing just to say on that is, it's not always to do with you either. No. They have certain profiles that they are looking for, and certain quotas of certain things that they need to fulfill, and maybe they've already fulfilled that quota in your college or in the college you're applying to, or they've already chosen 3 amazing applicants before they even saw you. And so there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes, so it's not really 100% anyway down to you whether you get that college, or there is a bit of a throw it to the Oxbridge gods and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. So yeah, as Harry said, Cambridge and Oxford are full of very intelligent people, and they've kind of realized that applying to one college shouldn't be significantly easier or harder than another college. So as a result, Oxford will interview you at more than one college. Typically, you'll have interviews at 2. Sometimes it can be higher. Whereas Cambridge has something called the winter pool, where if a college feels that you are good on paper, you were good on interview, but they're not quite good enough for them, they will pass you on to another college. And if you average out broadly, very broadly, your chances of getting in are broadly similar, whatever college you pick. So for instance, if we look here, the success rates and then the percentage of people who actually get in actually isn't too dissimilar. So at the bottom of the table,
yeah,
I don't know what year Matt took these numbers from actually.
Yeah, St Hugh's and Keble actually the most competitive on these metrics, aren't they? It's just like I would have placed them on mid-table.
Yeah. But I mean, it looks like even with Keble, and if you look at even the top tier, such as Wadham, getting confused now. The colleges at the top of the table, like Wadham, Corpus Christi, are around 20%, whereas those are the bottom of the table, 13%. There's a 7% difference. Well, 7% across an individual is almost nothing. 7% across the population is quite a bit.
Mm.
And there are just huge numbers of factors associated with this.
But the one thing that doesn't get reflected in that table is what are the quality of applicants that go to each.
Yeah.
right, which is impossible to really validate. I don't think there's any real data that you could pull out for that, but I certainly have some instinctive feelings. I mean, a lot of people who are giving you advice would say to you, don't apply to Merton unless you are really very strong academically.
Yeah.
And so they may only take 20% or 19%, but maybe you're up against people who really are in a top tier academically, because that is a widely known thing. But as I say, there's no real way we can measure that.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, like, if you look at Christchurch, for instance, at the bottom, they took 10% in the first round, but then they took it. So they took 90 kids, but then they took another 26 of the students that applied to Christchurch then went on to other students, for example. So they do try and balance things out as a result. It's not perfect, but it is a lot better than kind of just having your interview at one college and that's it. That's the interview.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Some of the, just final point on this. If you look at Corpus Christi, so they took 18%, and then there was just another 2% accepted at the university, whereas there's other colleges that kind of almost doubled, or went more, like Brasenose, for example, took 7% first entry, but then it went up to 17 across the whole university. So, but we're really kind of like delving into real details here. So
yeah, and often I did this exact same thing when I applied. So I got all the data from the last 3 years, put it into spreadsheets, and kind of crunched the numbers through. In the end, I actually ended up applying to probably the most competitive medical college, but thankfully it worked out. But what I would say is that even if it hadn't, my college was known as kind of sending students on to other colleges in the winter pool, for example. And actually, there's a really good slide that it's not in this deck, but essentially often what students will do is they'll look at 2-3 year averages, and they're the smart ones. But some students will just look at what happened last year, and you see these big swings happening. So, for instance, in 1 year, there were about 10 places for St. John's Medicine, and only 30 people applied for some reason that year. Obviously, those stats got released, and in the following year, that went to more than 100, the same number of places. So the competition per applicants per place went up massively. So if you are looking at stats, please don't look at just 1 year, look at 3 to 5 years to really get a full feeling of what's actually happening, especially with what's happening with COVID right now. The other thing to mention is open applications. So we discourage open applications quite spectacularly for Cambridge. The success rate tends to hover around 8% versus 20%. So the general, if you take away anything from this talk today, it is that your choice of college basically has zero impact on your chances, but just pick one. Don't put in an open application. Oxford and Cambridge will say it doesn't matter, but it does. Statistically, it does. Now, there might be an element of correlation versus causation. If you can't be bothered to pick a college, then perhaps you're not actually that interested, and therefore you may not be as good a quality candidate. There is that argument. A lot of what we've been talking about today can be found in the Oxford College Guide, which is available on Amazon. Matt and I wrote that a couple of years ago. It has been updated recently. So that kind of takes us to the segment about really the whole premise of the college system. But often at this point, parents and students want to know how we can help them. So Harry, what are the kind of elements? How can we help students who might be thinking about applying to Oxford and Cambridge this year? What do the programs look like?
So basically, we take people through every step of the process. So we used to do bits piecemeal back in the early days, but what we found is that the way to really get a student to where they want to go is to work with them through all stages and give them a rounded candidacy. So the stages are academics, which is kind of out of our control. That is done by the schools, but obviously we will support that, and we do some extra tuition, help people with A-levels and stuff as well. Personal statement, admissions test, and interviews. Now, each of those stages is actually quite a complex process, and as the years have gone by, it's become more and more complicated, and it's become more and more of a process. As I say, you know, when I went there, which is not that long ago, you know, I maybe did one mock interview with a teacher at school who had nothing to do with my subject, and then they just sort of packed me along and just said, oh, well, you know, good luck. And, you know, and that was how people did it back then. It just, you know, whereas now I would say that I was probably a typical candidate in that sense back then. Now I would say a candidate doing that is woefully unprepared. So it's changed a huge amount in the short time. So we work with people with tuition. We work with people, all of our tutors are Oxbridge. They're all have scored in the top 10% nationally. We work with people with intensive courses. So we have intensive courses for personal statement, interview, and admissions test, all timed at the right points in the cycle, so the student will peak just before the hurdle. We have an unrivaled body of resources that we've built up over a decade. You know, we've got over 100 books on all of the different tests, college selection, interviews, different subjects. So we've got an incredible body of research and information to support an application. And finally, we have university level seminars weekly, which help students to really get a depth of understanding in their subject. You know, A level is all about read, remember, regurgitate. Whereas when you go to university, particularly Oxbridge, it's about dropping that. It's not about what you remember anymore. It's about what you can think, what kind of arguments you can make, what kind of depth of thought you have. And, you know, that's the kind of thing that can't be done in a one-day course or, you know, a couple of sessions. You know, that's the kind of thing that you need to do over a period of time with a tutor who's been through this. And that's what we do. And we've honed the process year on year. And we've got better at it and better. And I think we've now have it down to a process where we will get a candidate as good as they possibly can be. Our success rate to 61%, rising to 75% for people who start early enough. You know, you can't tutor or, you know, buy your way into Oxford or Cambridge. You know, you need raw material. That said, you can materially improve your chances by going through a program like this. And we have the statistics in the success of our students to do it. And, you know, one of the reasons we do the enrichment seminars and things is because we want our students to be good candidates. We don't want them to just look like good candidates. We don't want to just sort of, a bit of polishing here, get a bit of test prep, and, you know, they'll come across like a good candidate. No, we want them to be good candidates. And, you know, so that's what we do in a nutshell anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. And yeah, the thing to stress here is our success rates do stack up. So if you look at, these are the top 25 schools that got kids into Oxbridge. If you look on the far right column, we've got the likes of Eton, Harrow, Winchester, Westminster, Sevenoaks in there. Their acceptance rates are nowhere near as good as ours. That is simply not, you know, it's not a discredit to them. They are fantastic institutions, but it is simply because we have the resources, expertise, and more importantly, time with the student to devote and focus on this full time, rather than having, you know, a couple of careers advisors in each of these colleges or universities. Each of these schools worrying about, because as a careers advisor, it's very difficult to help a medic and also help someone applying for modern languages and also help someone applying for engineering. It's just very, very difficult.
Yeah. And I'll just say something on that as well, is that the schools tend to think that they do a really good job, and some of them do a better job than others, obviously. And the better the school, the better job that they think they would do, because obviously you're often paying a lot of fees, so you would expect them to do an amazing job and everything. And, you know, the truth is, as Rohan says, you know, how many medics, how many doctors, medical tutors has even Eton or Westminster got? But, you know, how many law tutors have they got? Engineering, archaeology. And even if you're doing a subject that they do have, you know, it's like, well, did your history teacher go to Oxford? Okay, maybe even the history tutor did go to Oxford if you're lucky. Okay, when was that? 25 years ago, 30 years ago? You know, So that's the reason that our success rates are double even pretty much the top schools in the UK. So in fact, they're over double the average. There's the odd one that does a bit better than that, but and schools are juggling geography, pastoral care, girls hockey. They're juggling a million things, whereas 365 days a year, this is all we do.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? It's just, they're fantastic schools, but it's just very, very difficult, and it's getting harder and harder every year. Anyway, a little bit. I can see some questions kind of coming in about what type of student we work with. The main thing here is the most important thing is by far is the attitude rather than the achievement. So the achievement is obviously important. So if you don't have broadly straight 8s and 9s at GCSE, with the odd 7, then it's unlikely you're going to be an Oxbridge caliber student. If you're not predicted at least 1A start, 2As, and it's unlikely you're going to be an Oxbridge caliber student. There are some courses which ask for less, but in our experience, about 60% of applicants, particularly for science subjects, will be going and applying with 3A stars. So if you don't at least have the minimum requirements academically, you're unlikely to be a good fit. The next thing is we'll always choose a student who's motivated. So in our process, in our admissions process, we will make sure and make a big point of speaking to the student. Sometimes parents want us to call us up. I'm sure Harry, you'll get this. Parents will want to just sign up their kids straight away. We just don't do that. It's really important to us, and we have and will continue to do so, refuse students who just don't sound keen, interested, or if the pressure and the motivation is coming from the parents. It is important that the student wants this more than anyone else, because ultimately they're going to be the ones spending 3 to 6 years at university. What we do works. People like what we do. Lots of reviews independently on Trustpilot for you to browse through. And then a little shameless plug about a podcast that Will and I have started. So it's called The Two Blues, where we talk about all sorts of topical issues about admissions. Next week, we're going to be talking about the state versus private sector and what the impact of that's going to be over the next few years. So if you're keen, if you're interested, if you'd like to speak to us more, we're obviously going to start taking questions now, but if you'd like to find out more or book in a consultation, this little graphic here is going to talk you through how to do that. It's very, very straightforward. But the easiest thing to do is to go to uniadmissions.co.uk and then book in a consultation with me or our consulting team. Harry, are you taking consults this weekend or next week?
Yes, I'm potentially do some tomorrow, but next week's going to be the majority of them, because we've got various things booked in tomorrow.
Very lucky. You may even get
and you can email me as well if you want to just email me. My email is harry@uniadmissions.co.uk.
Wonderful. Well, we'll keep this up as a quick reminder to parents and students alike, and let's get cracking. So let's see here.
So I'm going to take the last one. In general, I think we'll go back to the beginning because that's only fair. But I'm going to take the last one first because it's a very easy one to answer. And it is it truly possible for state schoolers to get in? And the answer is yes, it's always been possible. And it is more possible today than it has ever been before. So, even in the last 10 years, it's shifted from about 50-50 private school, state school, to about 70-30 state school, private school. So today, your application is prejudiced against if you went to private school. They are actively looking for state school candidates who will meet the grades and meet the terms of application. So it will advantage your application being from a state school, but obviously you can't change what school you're coming from. But yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And last year I think we worked with more than 100 state school applicants and got a decent chunk of them in. So it is very much doable, and almost universities want state school applicants to a certain extent. Okay, well, let's see here. We've got any particular, so where can you find one-to-one tuition? Well, it depends on what you mean by one-to-one tuition. It's very easy to find a tutor anywhere online. If you're looking for a cheap online tutor, then just Google one-to-one tutor. If you're looking for a structured curriculum, which works like ours, then obviously you need to speak to our consulting team first, who will then assess your child or your actual entry requirements and then proceed from there. When you say the colleges may be looking for certain things, quotas, what would be an example of that? I think this is in response to something you mentioned earlier in the talk, Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Any particular references or examples that you were thinking of?
Certain things. Well, for example, we were just talking about the private school, state school quota. If they have 5 places for a certain subject and they've taken 5 private school students, or they've taken 4 private school students already, and you are applying to that college as a private school student, even if you're amazing, they're not going to take you. They're going to put you into a pool to send you to other colleges, because it's just not going to look good. You know, there is top-down quotas set at a university level that cascade into the colleges, which cascade into the subjects. And if your subject has only taken state school pupils or private school pupils, then you know, that's not going to be looked positively. You know, it just, you know, there's a lot of pressures on that sort of thing. But again, you can't know this. My point was just that there's factors beyond your control in all of this. Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, there are certain colleges, I think it's fair to say, that are very, very pro state school or very pro private school. It just historically, if you look at their student intake, there are some colleges at Cambridge which have 30% state school, and some colleges which are almost 90% plus. It really does depend on, I'm sure there are quotas, official quotas, but they are very much guidelines rather than absolute quotas. What I think Harry's trying to say is, if you have, as you said, 5 spaces and all 5 are unlikely to go to private schools without, you know, further scrutiny, I suppose. So it's better just to play safe. On that note, actually, every college does admissions very slightly differently. So my college, for instance, had a big spreadsheet, and it would kind of tally across your GCSE grade, your score in the BMAT, and various interviews, and kind of spit out a number. So no one actually knew if someone was going to get in until the spreadsheet kind of spoke. And in my college, 50% of our admission score was made up of the test. In some colleges, it can be up 20%. In some colleges, it can be even higher. So again, no college will tell you what their algorithm is, because that would cause national scandals. But broadly, if you go with the 40-40-10-10 rule that we often advocate, that tends to be a pretty good steering factor. Hi, Ishan says, taking a gap year, applying to medicine at Cambridge this year, please advise open or specific college on choice. Well, I think hopefully we've covered that, which is, please choose a college, don't apply to using an open application. Any other questions you want to go through, Harry, in the chat before we move on to the Q&A section?
I think, I don't know, do you have any in mind for best colleges for law? I mean, I would need to look at the tables for that. I can't do every subject and which college does off the top of my head.
No, and this is one of those where, as we alluded to earlier, please get in touch with us, because we do have admissions experts in most subjects.
So that gets into the kind of realms of the things that we do on our program, but it's not really possible to kind of get into that sort of thing now. Are there any colleges within Oxford that are more laid back than the others with respect to the amount of work, teaching, etc.? Yes, the short answer to that is yes. Some of the colleges, typically the ones lower down the Norrington table, you know, if you have a look at the Norrington table, particularly over time, and you have a look at the top 3 to 5 who stay up there, you know that the pressure there is going to be a lot higher than the bottom 5, you know. And the people in the middle are going to be somewhere in the middle. But when you go around the colleges, you'll get a sense of the atmosphere there, and kind of whether they're sort of laid back and quite easygoing, or actually very, very sort of like focused. And, you know, this is an academic powerhouse, this college. And, you know, so the subject's a large determinant, but your work is set by your tutors mostly, who are based in your college. So yes, is the short answer.
Yeah, Siva says, I got 2 A-star and A. Is it worth trying for Cambridge Medicine? So in these questions, we unfortunately have to ask another 10 questions to get to the bottom of whether it is worth trying for Cambridge Medicine. So if you are interested in applying for Cambridge Medicine and you need more help with deciding, then please get in touch with us. One thing we forgot to mention is all of our services, we'd never let money be an issue. So regardless of your financial background, please don't let that be a barrier towards working with us. We support hundreds of students through our foundation scheme every year, completely for free. So,
yeah. I think just there's a couple more that I'll just pick up quickly. You can find college, the state, where would you find the college, state school, private school intake numbers, Rohan?
So we've got them on our website on UniAdmissions.co.uk. The easiest will just be to kind of do a quick search on there. If you still can't find them, drop us an email or book a consultation. We'll happily send them across.
Yeah, if you drop an email to info@uniadmissions.co.uk, if you can't find them, someone will find them for you. And I'll just reply to Caroline as well, because she said, sorry, can't let this comment by Harry go unchallenged. Independent schools only 7%, rising to 12% of the school population, yet still equate to a third of Oxbridge intake. So quite inaccurate to say the system is biased against fee-paying schools. Now, that assumes that the candidates that fee-paying schools are churning out are the same as the candidates that state schools are churning out. And unfortunately, that is just not the case. And, you know, the difference between a school where there's 9 people in a classroom and a school where there's 35 people in a classroom and various other factors is a lot, plus a lot of the fee-paying schools are selective as well. So actually, it doesn't equate. Oxford is fundamentally a meritocracy. They're looking, Oxford and Cambridge, they're looking for the best students, right? So if they were just taking a proportion, then yes, Oxford and Cambridge would be 90% state school. But the truth is that if you were to take 90% state school kids from Oxford, you'd be turning away so many brilliant private school kids that, well, it would have an effect on the universities. You know, they're looking for the best people, and now they will look for the best people, and they will credit you if you've gone from a state school, because they will say, oh, well, he hasn't had generally the advantages in terms of the smaller classes and high level teachers and all of this kind of stuff. So it is correct what I say.
Yeah, the other thing to mention here is, if it's the one thing to think about things as a snapshot. If you just look at even the last 5 years, that percentage ratio has gone from 70-30 private school to state school to 50, almost 50-50 now. So
no,
there is
50-50 to 70.
By the way, yeah, there is positive pressure, and you know, this isn't new. It's literally coming from the horse's mouth. So it's coming from the Vice Chancellor at Cambridge, who has been very vocal about this, that they are positively discriminating against state school applicants, independent school applicants. Okay, right. Let's see. Let's move on to the Q&A segments.
I think there's a lot of the same questions, but
yeah. So hopefully we've answered your question. If we haven't, then please.
How you get a room? Most colleges, it's pretty random. As Rohan said, at his, it was if you got a better grade in the exams, you got first choice. But most colleges, it's pretty random.
Yeah. Which college holds formal halls the most? Again, depends where you're applying and what your circumstances are. My college is probably ranking up there in terms of, they did it 6 nights a week. Others do as rare as 1 night a week.
You need to talk to the colleges. We can't do a sort of like, oh, this one's got 2 nights, 3 nights, 5 nights from CD. But what you will find is a general pattern. The older, more formal, more traditional colleges will do more formal halls. The newer colleges will do fewer formal halls.
Yeah. Is there halal food in all colleges? Well, there is halal food in most colleges that I went to. I didn't dine in all of them. But as far as I know, there is halal food in most of them. Again, I can't vouch for the chefs in every single Oxford college.
Yeah. let's see, I got 6s, 4s, and 1 3. Is there any way I can get into Cambridge with good A levels? I think if you had the A levels in hand, so you applied a year later, depending on the subject, maybe, there, I think
there has to be some reason to explain your low grades.
Yeah.
By Oxford standards, they are low, so we just have to kind of explore that.
But if you had 3 A stars at A level and you had, as you say, GCSEs that weren't so good, which is actually not dissimilar to my situation as was, they're going to say, okay, well, look, this person can do 3 A stars at A levels. So, the fact that they bombed in some exams, 3 years ago now, but it's definitely put you on the back foot. And depending on the subject as well, it's also going to kind of, some subjects are just a lot harder than others, basically. Because the acceptance rates do really vary from subject. That is definitely true. Should you try and play the stats game when choosing a college? Different people tell you different things. My answer is little of column A, little of column B. Look at the stats, go around the colleges, bear it in mind, and also, at the end of the day, it is going to be beyond your control. So yes, a little bit, and also just see where you'd feel at home, see where you connect with the tutors at the open day. If there's a particular tutor you get on well with, that's definitely something that can help as well. So, it's not a perfect science. So yes, a bit of both is what I would say.
Brilliant. Okay. Harry, Maria says, how will you be able to make sure you get a room suitable for you, or is it chosen?
Yeah, well, suitable for you if you have a particular need. For example, people who had any kind of disability or had a special reason that they needed to be on the ground floor or in a certain area or something, there was always a kind of ballot for those. And then there was just a ballot. You would ballot for a certain building and, hope for the best. So, but you don't have the same room for 3 years or 6 years either. So, you'll probably win some, you'll lose some. And as you go up in the college, you get a better choice of room as well, typically. So.
Davina Jagpal says, I got majority 8 to 9 in GCSE, 1 to 7 in Spanish. Are those grades good for an Oxford application? Davina, broadly, they're about average for the Oxford and Cambridge applicant. Depends on, and that may vary depending on the subject you're applying to. For more details, get in touch with us.
Okay. So Dazan, if I'm saying your name right, says, so can we do like mock interviews or solve admission test questions together? Yeah, I mean, that's essentially the services we provide. Like, not Rohan and I personally won't be doing it with you, but our tutors will be doing them with you, take you through the admissions tests. That's what, from now until mid-December, when the interviews are done, that's what we do. And that's what we have been doing for the last decade.
Siva says, is there an advantage of doing 4 A level rather than 3? Again, one of those questions which we need to ask 5 to 10 more questions about, but very broadly, unless with a few exceptions that I don't have time to go into right now, very broadly, it's better to get 3 A stars than 2 A stars and 1 A. Sorry, than 2 A stars and 2 A's. Okay. The final question from Siva that's open is, why not good to put in open applications? And if I choose one college and that college is full, will they give the chance to swap colleges? So why not good to put it? I mean, hopefully you can start seeing that the open application, we've shown you that the success rates for open applications aren't as good. So it's an 8% success rate versus 20. There are lots of theories about why that might be, which I alluded to earlier in the talk. If I choose one college and that college is full, so it's quite difficult to know what you mean. Broadly, if you aren't deemed to be accepted at one college, they will often put you into the winter pool. Or if you're applying to Oxford, you'll get the chance to impress another college at another set of interviews.
And one from Natasha, hope it's not too late to join a bespoke program like yours to enhance chances for my child. Is there adequate time to prep? The answer is yes, there is. The sooner you get started, the better. And I don't just say that as a general thing. You know, we see the people who start at the start of the year, we get 75% of them in, and then that kind of slopes down to sort of 61% of this as an average over the year. So the sooner you get started, the better the chances are, really. But we would help people. We would help people at later stages as well if they need it. But I really would recommend not doing that, because it's just why put that pressure on yourself.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we've pretty much gone through everything. I appreciate there's one or two more questions, but we're just about out of time now. So if you would like to speak with us in more detail or find out more information, then you can just book a consultation as the slide's been going through. Otherwise, it's been wonderful catching up with you, Harry.